Port Douglas Pioneer Cemetery was gazetted in 1878. It is located at the regulation 1 mile from the township centre. The earliest marked grave is that of George Freshney, a 21-year-old who died on the 22nd of June 1878 and who worked locally as a part of his father's extensive red cedar cutting and export business in North Queensland. When you wander among the graves in this 1878 cemetery, many other sad stories are revealed for the following pioneering years at Port Douglas and surrounds. In the past, a rail line ran straight past the front of the unfenced cemetery, allowing mourners to alight here for the burial services. The cemetery here at Port Douglas is really beautiful. It has a lot of interesting headstones. This one over here has got one of the symbols I talked about on our Facebook page recently, which is the finger pointing down. It says, in loving memory of Ernest de Vere Hunt, born on the 15th of January 1878, died 26th of May 1921, aged 44 years. I'll just zoom in on that because that is a really good example of the flowers. Forget-me-nots, roses, and the hand pointing down, obviously a woman's hand pointing down because it was her husband. It has the frill around the wrist, so you can see it's a woman's hand, which is really interesting. But a lot of the headstones here, they're really quite ornate. This one here also, this one has the clasping hands at the top, which is showing it's a man and his wife, and basically it means that they will not be forgotten, they'll remember and be reunited in heaven. It says, in loving memory of Jane Milne, beloved wife of James Souter, who died 11th of April 1919, aged 51 years. And then also James Souter died 17th of February 1938, aged 72 years. So he lived for quite a while after his wife, actually around 20 years. It's beautiful. It also has the ivy on the top. You just see that on a lot of headstones as well. But I'm really impressed with the way the council up here maintains this cemetery. There's a little willy wagtail on that one. Some of them are really old and their headstones have fallen down or broken off. I'm sure the records are still there, so we'd be able to find out who they are. Also, we've got over here, this is a huge headstone here. I will try and zoom out so you can see it. It's for Thomas Lowe and his wife Barbara Lowe, born at Barra Castle, Aberdeenshire, 1850. Interesting, so she's born in a castle. So that's the obelisk, also a symbol you commonly see in old cemeteries. This one down here has the clasping hands, but they're added and they're made out of porcelain, so they tend to not discolour the same way as what they do the actual marble headstone. The porcelain tends to stay nice and white, so they always stand out on the graves. I can't read all of this one, but it is the loving memory of Rudolf Basinski, dearly beloved husband of Justine Basinski, who departed this life March 20th, 1903. It does have an inscription on there, but it's a little hard to read because of the mould. It also says down the bottom here, in loving memory of our dear mother Justina Basinski, who departed this life on the 21st November 1940, aged 92 years. Loving remembrance lasts forever, erected by her loving sons and daughters. That's a really nice gravestone. This one here Also very interesting. These are the sort of stones that depict the old rugged cross that Christ was crucified on. It says, "Sacred to the memory of Percy W.H. Thomas, born the 11th of March 1875 and died," I can't quite read it, but I think it's 1903, and it does have an inscription at the bottom, but it's a little bit hard to read as well. So it's quite interesting, those crosses as well. The rocks are to show, I think, the rocks that were put around the base of the cross on the hill of Golgotha to hold up the cross that Christ was crucified on. So here we've got an obelisk, or a column, with a shrouded top. And some beautiful flowers. And it says, "Loving memory of Mary, the wife of J.W. Crowley, who died on the 22nd of October 1890, aged 40 years. An affectionate wife and loving mother." And down the bottom it says, "Not lost, not lost, but gone before, to the land of peace and rest, wherein God for evermore we hope to meet, together blessed." That's a beautiful headstone. It's an interesting headstone that I can see over here, which obviously we're not going to see any writing on it because it's long gone, but it is made of metal. I think it's actually one that it's almost like it's what they call a ringed cross, and it looks to me like it has stars around the inside of the ring, which is quite unusual. So I don't know who that grave belongs to, but it's an interesting headstone nonetheless. So we'll keep moving on. I'm walking down this way through the cemetery because I'm expecting to come across the grave of the Buchanans. Now this one here is interesting. All these graves face east in Port Douglas, as they do in most graveyards. It's hard to show, but this one here, which is the big one in the middle of the picture, actually faces what you would say southeast. So I'm not really sure why that would be. It's a lovely headstone, but it definitely faces a different direction to all of the other graves in the cemetery. So I'm not sure if that's a reason. It also shows a very good depiction of the dove with the sprig of olive leaf in its mouth. Kind of, from what I understand, depicts the dove was, sent out from the ark after the flood, as told in the Bible, and the symbol of the dove was, a symbol of hope. It brought back a sprig of olive to show that the floods were receding. So this one also has the ivy on there. In loving memory of Eliza Marie, beloved wife of James Caddy, who died 6th of June 1915, aged 36 years, worthy of everlasting love from those she left behind. A better wife could not be found, or one more true and kind. What a beautiful inscription. People used to write a lot of lovely inscriptions on these old graves. We seem to have, that seems to have changed in more recent years. They tend to put the basic details and that's it, which is a little sad. But it is what it is. There's a lot of them, people that came out from England and Ireland in this cemetery. early pioneers of the far North Queensland area. Definitely the taller graves here are at the front. There's a particularly beautiful angel over here, which I'm walking up. It's very detailed and one that hasn't been broken, which is great because often you see these angels and different stones that have been broken and left. This one here looks like it's been repaired a couple of times, which is really good to see. Sometimes the local historical societies fix these up, other times it's the local council. That one has a rather large inscription on it, which I actually can't read all of it, but it is of Sarah Ann Davies. So, but there is this angel across here, which I think is a beautiful depiction. It's a very detailed work on a marble statue. And it's got these beautiful marble tiles in the actual base of the grave there. It says, in loving memory of F.D.A. Carstens, born the 9th of August 1838. I think I've read something about Carstens. I'll actually have a look when I go home and see if I can find anything else out about this grave, because it's a particularly beautiful one. Died the 20th of September 1906. So, you know, it's over 100 years old now, as a lot of these graves are. It's a beautiful day in far north Queensland today. It's probably about 23, 24 degrees. No humidity, which is fantastic because usually we're very, very overheated in this part of the world. There's another one. This one here, this is John O'Donnell, who died at Mount Malloy, where I'm going to later this afternoon. On the 11th of January 1909, aged 66 years. O Sacred Heart of Jesus, have mercy on his soul, erected by his loving wife. That one also has the finger pointing to heaven, so reaching up to God. And right up the very top of this one, you'll see that it has the S symbol, the I and the H, which is it denotes the first three letters of Jesus. You often see these on Catholic graves. Here's one, which is the ringed cross. William Joseph Maloney. And it says, who died 28th of December 1908, aged 56 years, on whose soul, sweet Jesus, have mercy, erected by his loving wife. So this looks like, I think I probably am in the Catholic part of the grave now, of the yard, the graveyard. As you see, this tall obelisk here, which I'm coming up on now. Well, it's the obelisk for a start, but it also has the three letters, the IHS, which is, I think it's Latin for the first three letters of Jesus. It says here, in loving memory of Timothy Joseph O'Brien, who was killed during a cyclone, 16th of March 1911, aged 32 years, O Sacred Heart of Jesus, have mercy on his soul. You know, cyclones, they're a big part of life up here in far north Queensland. And I think there's been quite a few people over the years killed in cyclones. If not, they've lost everything and had to start again, but they continue to do so. It's such a beautiful part of the world. You know, people continue to live here because it is such a beautiful part of the world, regardless of cyclones, crocodiles and other such things, and the heat. This one's William O'Rourke, also the ringed cross. Who have we got over here? Sacred to the memory of Bartholomew Boyle, who died 31st of July 1896, aged 39 years. Also Michael Joseph Boyle, who died 29th of August 1907, aged 17 years and 11 months. O Sacred Heart of Jesus, have mercy on their souls. R.I.P. Erected by the loving wife and mother. So that's a father and a son buried there. You know, it was so hard in those olden times. It was a struggle just to survive sometimes, so therefore we see lots and lots of graves of young people, which is really sad. But life was hard, work was hard, there was a lot of dangers. This one here is the urn on top of the column, and that is William McMahon, who departed this life 1885, aged 46 years. It's not a long time to live. He was born at New Ross Island, so he was an Irish immigrant. It was no mean feat just getting out here from Ireland on a ship back in those days. They survived the disease and, you know, ship sinking and what have you. They were pretty lucky, and then to get out here and have to work so hard to make a living, and they were real pioneers back in those days. I'm just glancing around, having a look at what other symbols are here. He's definitely into the Catholic area of the cemetery now. This one, poor child, it has the IHS on the top, and it says Mary Ellen Ryan, who died on the 20th of February 1889, aged 2 months. Wow. So many children in these old cemeteries. It just didn't, you know, times were hard. Disease was rampant in some places. There was no such things as vaccinations back in those days. This one here is an interesting one also. This is in memory of Sarah Jane, wife of John B. Isley, Inspector of Police, who died July 27th, 1881 at the age of 39 years. Now I actually have with me, I've actually got a DSHS Bulletin number 42, John Basie Isley, a short biography by John Walters. It's just a short insert that's been put out by the Historical Society in Port Douglas. It says, a personal tragedy occurred on the 27th of July 1881 when his wife Sarah Jane Isley died in Port Douglas. Her grave and memorial are located in the Port Douglas Cemetery. With his wife's death, John Isley now had to attend to his one surviving son's upbringing, and it was a responsibility that brought an early problem. The 3-year-old boy, Alfred Frank Isley, was unsettled by the nature of his mother's death and refused to reside in the house where the death had occurred. Inspector John Basie Isley applied for an alternative accommodation, but his request was denied. History does not tell us how the problem was solved. Inspector John Basie Isley remained at Port Douglas until 1886, so he was here another 5 years after his wife had passed away. So something interesting I've just come across here. This grave here, the one I spoke about earlier with the beautifully carved angel on the top, was FDA Carstens. It seems that this is the grave of his wife, in loving remembrance of Catherine, the beloved wife of FDA Carstens, who died February 12th, 1895, aged 56 years. I think it's interesting, somebody's put shells there. I know there is some significance for the Islander people with the shells. But it's interesting that she's not buried next to her husband, which is kind of unusual when it's a husband and wife, but nevertheless it's a beautiful grave. It looks like maybe it used to have a higher top on it.
but that seems to have gone now. Still has the totally intact fence though.
So I did some research on FDA Carstens. Turns out he was a pivotal figure in the Port Douglas and surrounding area. Frederick Dietlieb Andreas Carstens was born in Denmark to wealthy parents on the 9th of August 1838. He was well educated and attended Heidelberg University in Germany. As a young man, he developed health problems and decided to immigrate to Queensland, Australia for a more congenial climate. In 1866, he commenced business in Brisbane as a general merchant. He then moved with his first wife Catherine to Dalby and built a hotel there. He also operated a successful butchery. Whilst living in Dalby, he commenced his career in public life, being elector of the Dalby Municipal Council. His continued ill health prompted him to move to North Queensland. He purchased a hotel in Herberton on the Atherton Tablelands prior to moving to Port Douglas in 1886, where he purchased the Exchange Hotel, which was the leading hotel in Port Douglas at the time. He quickly became engaged in local politics. He served on the Douglas Divisional Board for several years. From 1893 to 1898, he served as the chairman of the board and was instrumental in the establishment of the Mossman Central Mill and the Port Douglas Mossman Tramway. Fellow councillors almost unanimously regarded Carstens as fair-minded, energetic, and having the best interests of the district at heart. In 1895, as a divisional board chairman, Carstens stridently advocated for the tramway, extracting a loan of £22,000 from a reluctant government. The construction of a tramway between Mossman and Port Douglas serviced both communities and allowed the expansion of the district's agricultural sugar industry. He was active in other community organisations and served as chairman of the Port Douglas Hospital Committee in 1892 to 1893. He had a personal interest in horse racing, which led him to become the secretary of the Jockey Club. So we can see that he was very involved in serving the community of Port Douglas. Carstens' wife Catherine passed away at the age of 56 in 1895, and in 1897 he married Pauline Pratt. He had no children from either marriage. Frederick Carstens died after a long illness in 1906. After his death, his widow Pauline Carstens commissioned North Queensland's leading monumental stonemasons, Melrose and Fenwick Limited of Townsville, to construct a public monument in his honour. No expense was spared when she ordered that monument. It was made of imported Italian Carrara marble and featured carved lions head on all four sides, two of which were drinking fountains, and a life-size bust of her husband. Mrs. Carstens presented it to the Douglas Shire Council in around 1907 to 1908, and it was placed in the centre of the main street of Port Douglas opposite the Exchange Hotel. At the same time, Pauline Carstens had an elaborate headstone also carved from the Italian Carrara marble and placed on her husband's grave. So that was the grave we saw earlier in the video, the elaborate one I was talking about, the angel very intricately carved, and it also had the black and white Carrara tiled stones as the base. Particularly beautiful gravestone that stood right out in Port Douglas. Also, that would explain, I guess, the reason he's not buried with his first wife Catherine, so they have separate headstones, because his second wife buried him, so she gave him a plot all of his own.
There's another one with a really good example of the finger pointing upward. Loving memory of Ellen, the beloved wife of Vincent Bainton. 22nd November 1910, aged 45 years. Another one lost way too early. Now this one here, I think I've read about this one. I'm doing a very good job with this camera at the moment. It says, in loving memory of Dennis O'Brien, died 13th of November 1905, aged 67 years. Also Nicholas Joseph Flynn died 21st of November 1905, aged 38 years. Not gone from memory, not gone from love, but gone to a better home above. Rest in peace. Now, I feel like the Flynns, this Nicholas Joseph Flynn, was killed in a tramway accident. And it says here, I have got Nicholas Joseph Flynn, born approximately 1867 and died 21st November 1905, aged 38 years. It says here in the Evening Telegraph, Wednesday, the 22nd of November 1905, a tramway accident, death at Port Douglas. Port Douglas, Wednesday. The axle of a goods wagon in the afternoon tram from Port Douglas to Mossman broke neat Colenso. The wagon fell forward, seriously injuring Nicholas Flynn, the clerk of the Port Douglas Shire Council, who was sitting on the platform of the passenger carriage. He was taken to hospital where he died. And then in the North Queensland paper, Monday the 26th of May 1902, it's got mining notes about Mr. Flynn. It says, having succeeded in forming Mount Sturgeon tin mines into a syndicate. I don't think that's... Oh yes, it does say... It says... I'll start that again. Mr. Flynn, having succeeded in forming Mount Sturgeon into tin mines into a syndicate of £1,000, says the Port Douglas Gazette. A general meeting of shareholders was held at his office Wednesday last. Messrs J. Reynolds, A. Gibbs, R. Donnelly, J. E. Muntz and J. Forsyth were appointed as directors, with Nicholas Flynn as the secretary. The object of the syndicate is to work the Mrs. M. Reynolds tin claim at Mount Sturgeon, on which a tunnel of 100 feet in length has been driven. So that's interesting. So he had a part in the... He was the secretary of that board that was running the tin mine. Sad way to die, that's for sure. So that's interesting that I came across that. So there's Dennis O'Brien, Nicholas Joseph Flynn. On this side there's Teresa O'Brien, and on this side, in loving memory of Bridget Flynn. And it says here, our beloved mother, Teresa Josephine Bates. And over here, it says, in loving memory of our loving son and brother, John Dennis Flynn, departing this life on the 27th of June 1928, aged 24 years. Another life lost way too early. It's also a beautiful headstone. It says, Lord have mercy of the soul of Kate Timoney, who died May the 19th, 1889, aged, I can't tell if it's 32 or 52 years. Rest in peace. It's a beautiful headstone though. Just going back up this way a little bit to have a look at this headstone here. It's an interesting one. It's the headstone of William Henry Buchanan. Now, it says, in memoriam, this headstone is erected by the sorrowing widow and 6 children of the late William Henry Buchanan, who departed this life on the 3rd of September 1883, aged 46 years. He was a good, faithful husband and father. The spirits of the just mingle together. So that's him, and see, he was obviously a Mason because he has the Masonic symbol on the top of his grave. Now, I do have a little bit of information about the Buchanans. There's quite a few of them buried here. There's also Gibsons and Robertsons, who are all related. So the Gibson grave is just this one next to it. And then there's Annie Buchanan, who would have been his wife. Now, there's some interesting stuff here that I've got. I'm just going to back up a little bit so I can get the full grave in the picture here. And the information here that I've got, it says DSHS Bulletin number 10, some notes on hotels at Port Douglas and the Courthouse Hotel by Noel Ware. William Henry Buchanan, who had been mining for gold at Ravenswood and Charters Towers, successfully applied for a retail spirit licence, the first 21 of which were issued for Port Douglas in July 1878. His father-in-law, John Gibson, who is buried just next to him, just over there. You can see that one there, that's John Gibson, so that's his father-in-law. Yes, it says his father-in-law John Gibson built Buchanan's family hotel on the strategic corner lot. The hotel was a substantial timber building extending along the main street, with the public bar door prominent at the Macrossan and Wharf Street corner. With the erection of the Port Douglas Courthouse nearby in 1879, the hotel's name was changed to Buchanan's Courthouse Motel. William Buchanan selected 400 acres of land on the banks of the Mossman River, which he named Bonnie Doon. 2 years later, aged 46, he died, leaving his widow Annie to manage the various business interests and 6 children. Bonnie Doon had been transferred to Annie on Buchanan's death, and it was her cane which was the first ever to be crushed at the newly completed Mossman Central Mill on the 23rd of August 1897. It says here, W.H. Buchanan. This was in the Queensland Figaro, Saturday the 25th of August 1883. W.H. Buchanan of the Courthouse Hotel, Port Douglas, has died of typhoid fever, which a lot of people died of back then, which he caught recently while superintending the work of his farm at the Mossman River. Port Douglas has turned out en masse to his funeral, which was a Masonic one. Buchanan was well known in the early days of Charters Towers and Ravenswood. He was the proprietor of the crushing mill in the towers. So that's interesting. Now it talks about a little bit here, there's not much, but it just does say it's from the Maclean History by Leslie Clark. It says, John Gibson was born at Eaglesham near Paisley in Scotland in 1830, where his parents were married in 1830. Jane born in 1929, possibly at Paisley, but there are no records. John was most likely a woolen dryer. They had children in Scotland. Annie Buchanan, later Rose. So she may have married again, but Annie Buchanan is actually buried here next to William Henry Buchanan. And it does say, it's a little bit hard to read her gravestone, but it does say, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and they shall be no more in death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. So yes, she died, I think it's 1951. So she lived quite a long time after her original husband, William Henry Buchanan. So that's a little interesting story. So while we're here at Port Douglas Cemetery, I'm going to walk over this way because I think there's an interesting grave across here. It's a grave of a man, William Thompson, also known as Billy Thompson, that was murdered apparently by his wife, Ellen Thompson. And she was actually the first and last woman that was ever hung for a crime in Queensland. So I think this one here, we're coming up on it now. There's a lot of traffic today on the road. Pretty ornate looking headstone, this one. And it says, I'll just zoom it out a little bit so you can see the whole thing. But it does say, sacred to the memory of my generous and beloved brother William Thompson, who met his death by cruel and treacherous murder on the 22nd day of October 1886, aged 66 years. This stone is erected by his much esteemed and beloved brother Thomas Thompson. God wanted him in heaven in company with the blessed. His abode is now with the angels, where the weary are at rest. Our Father in heaven, thy will be done, thy ways are inscrutable. So that's interesting. Very graphic description of his death on the headstone. And I'll have a little bit, I have got some other information about Ellen Thompson, which I'll talk about a bit later in the video.
So I've had a look on the internet and I found many articles written about Ellen Thompson and John Harrison with regard to the murder of William Thompson. I've chosen to read this one from Australian's Dark Heart because it gives a good, concise report of what actually happened regarding the murder, as well as the proceedings that came after, which led to the hanging of Ellen Thompson and John Harrison. Also, there's an article on Trove that, if you care to look it up, is the full transcript from the Townsville Bulletin of the court case and what happened in the court case. It's a bit long-winded to read on the video today, but it is available on Trove to read. Anyway, getting back to this is from Australia's Dark Heart. Ellen Thompson, executed on the 13th of June 1887, believed to be the only woman hanged in Queensland. Ellen, 11 years of age, and her sister Mary, 9, arrived in Australia on the 6th of April 1858 on board the ship Joshua. The ship's manifest lists their widowed mother, Mary Lynch, as a native of County Cork, Ireland. They would join her sister residing in Goulburn, New South Wales. During the Palmer River gold rush in early 1870s, Ellen was known to be in Cooktown, widow of William Wood, struggling to support her children. Arriving in Port Douglas about 1878, Ellen commenced work as a housekeeper to William Thompson, who had selected a farm on the Mossman River. Ellen and Billy Thompson married in November of 1880 after the birth of their daughter Helen, also known as Little Ellen. By 1886, life was difficult, the marriage was strained, the children sent away. The friendship of Ellen with a young Marine deserter on the adjoining Bonnie Doon selection caused conflict. The conflict would explode into the charge of murder after the committal hearing in Port Douglas. Now that John Harrison, who was the man talked about in this part, he was working for William Buchanan on his farm Bonnie Doon, and he was the guy we were talking about earlier, also owning the Courthouse Motel. So just reading sections from Australia's Dark Heart, this part's from the double execution. It says, Thompson was attended by 2 Sisters of Mercy, whose ministrations she appeared thankful to receive, and to whom she continuously repeated her protestation of innocence of the crime which she was about to suffer the penalty, while denouncing the Governor and the Executive for refusing to grant computation of her sentence. She admitted that from a legal point of view she may have been guilty of the charge of murder, but urged that morally she was as innocent as an unborn babe. Her version of the tragedy was briefly that her husband and Harrison had been quarrelling, when she, with the intention of making peace between them, in a jocular spirit remarked to Harrison that if he did not shut up, the old man, meaning Thompson, would shoot him. Harrison immediately took up the revolver, saying, "Will he? Well, I will have the first shot," and at the same time firing. Throughout the morning, Mrs. Thompson conducted herself with the greatest respect towards the Sisters of Mercy, and also towards Father Fauhy, who visited her in her last half hour of life. She bore up bravely to the last, and even when standing on the scaffold, her fortitude was remarkable. Attended by Father Fauhy, she stepped to the drop, and her voice was unshaken as she said, "Goodbye, everybody. I forgive everybody from the bottom of my heart for anything they have wronged me in this world. I never shot my husband, and I am dying like an angel. Only once within a few seconds of the fatal moment, there was a perceptible quiver in the unhappy creature's voice, when with her almost dying breath she murmured, "Oh, my poor children, take care of my poor children, will you, Father?" The next instant her body was hanging in mid-air. Harrison is said to have been a soldier in the British Army. To Archdeacon Dawes, who was with him during his dying hours, and to those ministrations, he appeared deeply impressed. He stated that both he and the woman were implicated in the death of Thompson, but although he did fire the shots which killed him, when it was done in self-defence. When standing on the scaffold, he spoke not a word, and his expression of his features could be traced not to the slightest evidence of fear or nervous excitement. So it's a pretty tragic story all round. Looks like, times were pretty hard back then, and they obviously were going to make a statement with hanging this woman. From all accounts that I've read, I don't think she really did anything wrong at all. It sounds like that her husband was a difficult man to live with, and so she was just, living her life. She'd obviously taken comfort in this younger guy from the other farm over at Bonnie Doon, and he was helping her out, helping her cope in the situation she was in, and it all led to a horrible, violent tragedy in the end. So that's all I've really got on Port Douglas Cemetery. I've really enjoyed this cemetery because there's just so many stories. In fact, I think I'm going to make another video in the very near future, because we've just found, looking up all these different headstones, there's so many different stories in that area, during that pioneering time when Port Douglas was being forged into a town. So many tragedies happened, and it was just hard to believe. There's another one about a man that was killed while saving his mother in a cyclone that I'd like to talk about. I did briefly talk about it earlier in the video, but I'd like to expand on that story. And also I want to make a story about the Low Isles and the little boy that's buried in the cemetery there. And there's also a few others. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. We're going to continue to make more videos, so if you feel inclined, I'd like you to come and visit us again at History Sleeps Here, and we'll see you again on the next video. Thanks very much.